So here's what I'm hoping we're going to learn. Just it's a little bit of back. I'm afraid I have to say it's a little bit of kind of information about how the NDIS works, because I think that can be a challenging thing to understand, and it makes such a difference to if you've got an understanding of the way that the role of different people within the NDIS, the way that plans can be set up, and the way that supports can be allocated into the different areas within plans to be able to actually access the funding and supports that you need in terms of human science service delivery. So we will be talking about the NDIS, but we're also just giving some background information about how to make the case to your planner and to the NDIS about why keyword science supports are appropriate, reasonable and necessary for those criteria, also giving some information about that. Talking about the plan options, because that can make a difference to what you can access, and you have the opportunity potentially to make some choices about how you set up your plans. About the different roles, as I mentioned, who's who in the zoo, and who you need to actually be communicating with, and who you can bring on board to help you to get the support that you need in your plan, and trying to improve that potential for those supports to be included, and giving you a bit of an understanding of the supports that might be available that you can access and how you can make that link to your NDIS goals. So when you talk, if you are familiar with the NDIS in any way, you will understand that there's a lot of talk about what's reasonable and necessary, and it's actually proved quite challenging for the NDIS, I think, to get their head around that. But the bottom line is it's important that you make the case for things being reasonable and necessary, because they won't be included in plans by the NDIS, by the planner, unless you are actually able to make it clear that they do fit those criteria. And those criteria are basically that they're related to the participant's disability, so that you're not asking for support that, or that you're only asking for supports really that are linked to, in this instance, communication difficulties and the potential to change someone's communicative participation, their ability to communicate effectively to get their message across. It's important that they don't include day-to-day living costs. And I think there's no doubt that providing keyword science supports are not related to day-to-day living costs, that they're only related to disability support needs, that they represent value for money. Now, that's a difficult one to necessarily demonstrate, but the bottom line is that keyword sign supports are evidence-based, so that there is research that has actually demonstrated that they are effective to make a difference. And and then it's up to, it's basically decision-making between families and the people who are the providers to work out what's going to actually achieve the best bang for the buck. And that can vary, but usually if it's a recommendation, if interventions are evidence-based, then there's less concern from the NDIS about value for money. And also it's important that they are going to be effective and beneficial to the participant. Now the next slide, and again, we can make the case for that, is just something that I actually picked up from, where was it from? Family advocacy. I was looking through, and this is sort of the flow chart. I was actually looking for it, sort of an amusing flow chart, and then I thought, oh well, perhaps I'll just stick with this one. But basically, this is the sort of thing that this is your planner's thinking. This is a sort of a representation of what planners are thinking about when they are making decisions about what sort of support should go into plans. And so it's kind of useful to know that, because you need to go, okay, what information can I provide them that says, yes, it was recommended by an allied health profession, and how can I help them understand that this is necessary to assist the participant to be involved in social activities, and what can I do that's actually going to make them help the planner to understand that this is reasonable. It's something that is beyond what it's reasonable to expect families to provide. So I just refer you to that. That's on a site called Family Advocacy, and it just provides a nice sort of pictorial representation of what you might need to kind of think about to make sure that you've got the information that you need to be able to provide to the planner. Because I think we're going to come up to what planners are involved in doing, and I think that it's really, I'll say now that a part of what you can do to help make it more likely that you'll get the support that you need is help the planner to do their job. And the planner's job is to decide what's reasonable and necessary to include in the plan. So if you can provide them with the information that they need to help them make their decision according to these criteria, then it will make your experience likely a better one. Because it's a huge ask of planners. Planners are having to make decisions about what's reasonable and necessary for people of all ages with all sorts of disabilities, a whole range of needs. And it's a big task, so helping them with that process is useful. And they don't necessarily have that knowledge because, A, there's been quite a lot of turnover of planners, and also because they don't necessarily have even a disability-related background. Welcome, Jane, as well. Nice to have you here. Just Jane just let us know that she's on board and is the mother of a 7-year-old child who's also non-verbal. So, why and how are keyword sign eligible? There is going to be more information coming about that, about this, but we can assure you, and you can assure planners, that the provision of augmentative and alternative communication generally, and keyword sign, which is a type of augmentative and alternative communication system specifically, is an evidence-based intervention. And it's evidence-based as being effective and achieving positive outcomes across a range of sort of criteria, but basically with communication development for people with a range of disabilities and across ages as well. So there's quite a lot of evidence out there. There's more needed, but it's growing that keyword sign is an effective intervention. And certainly there is a lot of evidence that AAC is an effective intervention. So you can kind of hand on heart say, yes, I know that this is evidence-based. It is something that should be or can be recommended as part of speech pathology intervention practice. So it's something that can be recommended by speech pathologists as part of their support. This is something that planners also look for. Has this been recommended by someone who we have decided we can trust in terms of service delivery? So you can also say, as part of the guidelines for speech pathologists, there's clear information that use of keyword sign is appropriate as part of their intervention. Susan's asking if we'll receive a copy of the slides or presentation. I actually don't know about that. Yes, we can make that available. Okay. So I'm not quite sure about how, but be in touch and we'll make sure that is made available to you. And saying that, I have to say I'm aware that not all speech pathologists would necessarily think of using keyword sign as part of their intervention, particularly, I hope this is changing, but I know that in the past it may have been that people would only think about AAC at all and keyword sign as sort of a last resort, and would also maybe think that don't think about total communication and maybe more focused on using some sort of communication book or board or device, and not understand that keyword sign can actually be part of supporting a total support system for the development of communication. So if you are engaged with a speech pathologist and they perhaps haven't mentioned the idea, then raise it and just say, I'm just wondering whether you could find out whether this might be something that's appropriate for my child, if you're a parent. And ask for them to actually do a little bit of research because they can link with the professional association and also look at the evidence base and help them to make their decisions about whether it's appropriate for your child or your adult or the person, whoever it is that has got a communication difficulty who can benefit from keyword sign. It's very clear from the evidence also that that the use of keyword signs can contribute to communication development and participation. When I talk about participation, it's basically being able to send a message effectively and successfully, and to be able to receive messages effectively and successfully. So the other thing that's really important about that is that you want to make sure that you're linking through to the goals, that you're linking your interest in or request for communication keyword sign supports to be involved through to your goals, or vice versa, that you're thinking, okay, what kind of goals that am I actually hoping to achieve through the provision of these keyword signs? Someone said, why don't you consider keyword sign? I think it's a good idea. It seems to make sense. But, what am I really wanting to do? And we'll talk a little bit later about some of the goals that might link there. But it's important to make that link between your goals because that's what the planner will be looking for too, that the supports that you're requesting are linked to the goals that you've got in your plan. Oops, sorry. No, I've lost myself. Whoops. Back. So obviously I got a goal is to contribute to communicative development and participation. And that's one of the sort of key areas of outcomes that the NDIS might think about. But it also, another one is that someone's being supported to make social connection. And again, there's evidence that communication underpins social connection, and so that if you're looking to improve someone's social connection, their ability to interact with peers, for example, then it can make sense to include a request for keyword sign type supports. Libby's just mentioned, for those who aren't aware, that aren't keeping an eye on the chat, that we'll make the recording available as well as the slides. So, as I mentioned, a little bit of a who's who in the zoo as far as the NDIS is concerned. If you have already been involved with the NDIS, you probably have this information, but as I've mentioned, planners are the people who are actually employed by the agency, who make the decision about which supports are provided and where they fit in the plan. They sort of create the plan, and they have to make that decision about reasonable and necessary. If you are in early intervention or you have got a connection with a local area coordinator, some of that sort of responsibility, sort of creating a draft plan, as it were, has been outsourced to those people. So you might be working with a local area coordinator or an early intervention support worker or early intervention partner. So they might also be part of it, but it's the planner who sort of gives it the stamp of approval. So whoever you're working with, whether it's a LAC or an EI partner or a planner, they can all benefit from getting that information, which we're hoping to support provision of. And another thing, something that can make a real difference to the flexibility that's available is what kind of plan you have. For those people who are participants or have children who are participants, can you let us know what kind of plans you have, if you know what kind of plan you have? Whether it's agency managed or plan managed or self-managed. Plan managed, Rachel, good choice. Some of you may not have yet engaged with the NDIS, so you might be just looking to this to get yourself organised and start the process. So in which case, good. Yes, good idea, Cassie. I think if I were a participant in the NDIS, I would be going with self-managing. Susan, you can, the family can request to be self-managed. The NDIS has actually moved a little bit with this. Initially, very few people were being allowed to self-manage or being given plan-managed funding. But more recently, the NDIS, like in the last 2 years at least, the NDIS has actually been including plan management funding within plans, and so people have been able to go to a plan manager, and that just can make life a lot easier. I do understand that there may be some changes coming down the line about that. Some of the recent consultation around the early intervention, there were some indications from the NDIA that they wanted to shift back to all EI participants being agency managed, but I don't know how they will achieve that. That was a couple of months ago that was proposed, and I haven't heard any more about that. So, but if you have got an opinion about that, please do make that your opinion clear to the NDIA. So just the differences are basically with agency managed plan, the providers have to claim for their services through the NDIS portal. So it means that as a participant, you don't have to do anything, which is great, but it does mean that it restricts who you can go to access your support, because it's only NDIS registered providers who are able to provide services to agency managed clients. So, and there are a lot of EI providers, I'm aware, that aren't NDIS registered, including me as a provider. And certainly a lot of the keyword sign providers, like the workshop Keyword Sign Australia or Keyword Sign South Australia or Keyword Sign Victoria, not all of us are actually registered. So to be able to access a workshop, it can be challenging if you're wanting to be going agency managed. Plan managed means that the funds are actually managed. So invoices are sent by providers to the plan manager, and the plan manager makes the payment. Again, families don't have to kind of do anything in that sort of scenario, and in fact, but it does mean that participants are able to access services from registered and unregistered providers. And if you're self-managed, then it means that you have virtually sort of complete freedom about how you use the funding in your plan, including using funding from across the different areas in the plan. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And in that case, providers basically send their invoices to participants. Participants pay them. They then submit that their invoices or receipts to the NDIA, and then they get paid back for the amounts that they've actually provided. And self-managed participants are also able to access services from anyone registered or unregistered. You know, if it were me, I would be if I was a participant in the NDIS, I would be plan managed, because you actually get those funds for plan management included in your plan. So it doesn't cost you anything. And it also means that everyone, you've got freedom to access registered and unregistered providers, but you don't have to actually manage the money process, which I think I would definitely want. But it does. Being self-managed does actually give you potentially greater freedom about how you use the funds in your plan. And I'll talk. That'll become a little bit more understandable later. So I talked about plan manager. So the plan manager is the plan manager is. It sounds as though they're doing more than they are. They just pay the invoices, basically, that's what they do. So and they keep track of the spending, which is also a great thing. So that I would assume that they would give notice to participants if they're beginning to run out of the funding that they're using for a particular support. But they don't actually do anything more than sort of manage the money side of it. The people who potentially can do more are support coordinators. So support coordinators are supposed what's sort of talked about as far as support coordinators are concerned is that they that support coordination is also a funded item within a plan. They'll support you to understand and implement the funded supports in your plan. I know the NDIA talked about them bringing their plan alive. They're supposed to also focus on supporting participants to learn how to manage their plan themselves and just build their skills to be able to source providers. They are supposed to assist participants to work with the providers about what they're going to offer and how much it's going to cost. And they are supposed to support with service agreements being put in place as well. From what I know about the way that support coordinators work, they mostly have been, at the moment, finding providers. I think that a lot of their time is just taken up just finding people who are available to provide resources, to provide the support that participants are seeking in their plan. Be interested to hear from anyone who's working with support coordinators, either as a provider or as a participant, who are doing what sorts of other things that they're doing. I mean, I think ideally it's a great role to have. I think the idea is that they sort of bring everything together and coordinate who's doing what within the plan and how it all fits together, and find the providers who are able to do all that's involved. But I think at the moment that's been fairly challenging because there's wait lists in quite a lot of places. So let us know if you've found a support coordinator who's been doing more for you. And then there are providers, and that's people like me and a whole group of other people out there who are providing support. And obviously in relation to keyword sign, there are a number of providers. There's the keyword sign, the state-based organisations, where there are state-based organisations. Not all of the states have a state-based group. But for example, in South Australia, Keyword Sign South Australia is actually the organisation that manages the provision of sort of the scheduled annual workshops across the year, and also coordinates the provision of workshops to people if they're requesting those in their own setting or for a smaller group that haven't been sort of scheduled ahead of time. It's interesting to hear, Rachel, that you say that support coordination wasn't available in the early years. And I think that is because the idea is that it's the early intervention partners who are supposed to be doing some of that support coordination work. But I think that they're also sort of flat out trying to find providers and aren't really at the point where they're able to do more. So, but the other people who might be providing keyword sign, there might be people who are developmental educators who might be able to provide some keyword sign support. There might be allied assistants who are presenter trained because and so had competencies to provide supports around keyword sign. Speech pathologists, the people who are trained as presenters in keyword sign do tend to be predominantly speech pathologists, and so that's to provide that kind of support with implementation as well as workshops, and then speech pathologists who may have just done a basic workshop but who've got an understanding of how keyword sign can work as part of the total communication system for somebody, as part of multimodal communication. So there's a range of different providers who might be there and involved in providing keyword sign support. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what's supposed to be now. Oh no, I think I've messed things up a bit. So I'm actually going to go to the next one and then we'll go back. So one of the issues around providing using supports within plans is that a lot of them are very focused on the participant. It's all about providing something to the participant. And that gets challenging when we're talking about providing support for keyword sign, because if you're talking about communication, having a communication difficulty isn't something that just belongs to the individual. it actually belongs to their entire environment. And so you want people who are out there in the environment of the participant who's going to be using keyword sign as part of their multimodal communication to be able to understand and use keyword sign too. So that's a bit of a challenge, but it's just about making the case, and there are ways around that. So I just thought I'd come up with a few goals and talk through those, some examples of sorts of goals that might be related to NDIS supports and keyword sign support provision. So you might have in as a goal that you're going to support the participants' ability to communicate more effectively with their peers, or with extended family, or with educators, or with members of recreational sport groups that they're involved with, depending on what it is that's important for that particular participant and at that point in time in their life. Another one might be to support their participants' ability to effectively use a greater range of communication functions so that they're not only able to request but are able to reject or to ask questions or to make comments. So that's a great goal that might be very appropriate, but providing keyword sign support is part of the way of actually helping that person to meet that goal or achieve that goal. Whoops, just jumped that one. You might want to support the participant's ability to make friends and to maintain friendships. So obviously being able to communicate and have interactions that are successful, to be able to ask questions of other people about how they're going. All of those things are part of being able to make friendships. What did you do on the weekend? What's your favourite colour? Do you have any brothers? I've got a brother. All of those things can make such a difference, and being able to use keyword sign can to ask those questions and just to help support the development of those communication skills, including speech intelligibility, can be very much supported by using keyword sign. It might be around helping to reduce behaviours of concern, because being unable to get your message across, or having communication partners who don't notice your message or respond to or acknowledge your message, can certainly lead to some frustration. So providing keyword sign supports can be part of helping to address those sorts of behaviours of concern. It might be around supporting improved school attachment and participation, because if you're not able to understand the information that's being shared at school, and you're not, it's proving difficult to be able to respond to directions in schools, or to actually take your turn, or even be considered as capable of taking a turn, then that's a great goal, and providing keyword sign support can be part of addressing that. It might be about supporting increased independence and participation. That's a nice, big, broad goal that might be part of the sort of goal that you want to include in a plan. And being able to, being able to interact with people who are less familiar communication partners can be, very much supported by using keyword sign, as also potentially other AAC, and support with that independence, and just being able to be understood when you're interacting with someone. Being able to be better understood can make a big difference to people's participation. So just being involved in those daily activities, but really being involved, being able to ask questions and understand what's happening, and take your turn can make a big difference. You could, you might want to include strength and understanding of and development of protective behaviours, which is an incredibly important goal. So again, being able to help people to understand, to support people with their understanding of communication and their development of their expressive ability, learning how to reject, learning how to report, talk about their own feelings can be really important. And again, keyword sign can contribute to that. So that was just a few. Have any of you got any suggestions about other sorts of goals that might be that you could include as part of your plan, and which keyword sign supports can contribute to helping that participants achieve? Just pop them in. Oops, going back. No pressure. We can come back here if you want to. I mean, I guess the bottom line is, it's really helpful for you to think about what the linkage is between the provision of keyword sign and what's it actually go. What is the goal? And the bottom line is it can contribute to the achievement of a whole lot of changed outcomes and changed capacity for people to be supported in their communication development and their use of communication. And of course, that keyword sign really underpins and supports understanding, comprehension in situations, as well as contributing to intelligibility of speech, because it's actually supported by the use of the sign or gesture. And that leads to so many more opportunities for people to hear the target that they're aiming for, because they've been successful in communicating what it is that they were, they've got their message across and people have understood what it was they were trying to say using their perhaps less intelligible speech. And so they get to hear the model. So yay, they get to have another go. They've got the adult target there. They get to actually have another go at producing and get closer to that adult model. So just think about it, but if would it be useful for those kinds of goals, that sort of those ideas about the sorts of goals that might be included in plans, and that it could therefore be linked to keyword sign supports in terms of achieving those goals and outcomes? Would it be useful to have those listed? You'll have them in the presentation, but I'm thinking about kind of producing something that we could pop onto the keyword sign website for our general members and others, so that people can kind of go and can check it out and think, oh, now what is it that I'm trying to achieve? What is it I think that keyword sign is going to help with? Just yes, thank you, Ashley Ray. That's a little bit of affirmation there. Thank you. Okay, we'll do that, and we can make it a bit of a living document. I think that it does. There really are so many ways that keyword sign contribute to participation and development of independence and function using NDIS speak. I always think function, when I talk about participation, I'm a participation person rather than a function person. But for me, it's kind of the way that the NDIS is thinking about independence. It does incorporate participation, that ability to actually be involved and successful. Is really important. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about support categories and plans. So we've talked about the types of plans that you can have, but there are actually 3 different sort of groupings of funding, which is another name for support, that 3 different groupings that funding goes into, and they are created with different purposes in mind. So core basically is about enabling participants to complete activities of daily living. So there's a real focus on people coming in and providing in-home support for people with their activities of daily living, or helping out with cooking, or accompanying people on to recreation, or helping with transition to school, or things along those lines. So again, it's kind of very much focused around doing things to or for the participant, but there are sometimes included in core what's called a consumables budget. Now, the idea about the consumables budget is that it was going to be used for kind of odds and ends that aren't all that expensive, that are particularly related to the person's disability. That's why they're needing those sort of consumables. So the example that the NDIS sort of quotes is the components that go with nasogastric feeding. But it can be broader than that. And I don't know if they're still doing it, but for a while, the NDIA was including a sort of $1,000 worth of consumables budget in the budgets or the plans for children in early intervention. So I don't know whether they're keeping that up or not, but you could ask for some consumable funding, some funding to go into a consumables budget for things like provision of posters or of signs that you. And in the new world, in the old world, it might have been to purchase the keyword sign app. In the new world, when we have a resource creation option attached to the website, it might be for a subscription to be able to access that and be able to create posters so that you can put up the things that go with cooking or the signs that go with what you're doing when you're doing nappy change or bath time or whatever. Bridget's just saying that that you've noticed that they're not giving much of that consumable budget anymore. So it might be worth trying to make a case for some consumables, because I think it's completely appropriate. It's sort of a subscription and even a membership of Keyword Sign Australia. It is something that's consumable. It's completely linked to the person's disability. It's about building their capacity, and it's using capacity building approaches. So it's building the capacity of their communication partners as well. So if with a good planner, or you could make the case and get the support for a consumables budget to address those sorts of needs, because it's not like it's not like you're wanting to go on about to waste the NDIS's money. No. Rachel's saying that she's had good experiences, so that's really great to hear. So that you've got, and I know that they're pretty good with providing those consumables for what they see as being, what they can clearly see is linked to the person's disability. That might find it a little bit more difficult to see this as being linked, although you really wouldn't be doing it unless it was going to support the person with disability. So that's one thing to think about. Capital funding for support, keyword sign supports doesn't tend to be from core, but you might be able to do it with that consumable. There's capital funding, and that's meant to be used for assistive technologies. So again, you could potentially make a case for purchasing a series, like a lanyard that's got some keyword signs on it. So anything that's kind of an object that's supporting a person with a disability to be able to be more independent can be seen as fitting under that capital budget. It's a little bit, they've seen any kind of AAC that's produced, whether it's a communication book or a board or a personal communication dictionary, something that sort of says, when I do this, it means that, so please respond in this way. All of those are seen as being assistive technology, so all of them can be potentially requested under capital. And Cathy, we're just about to get there, so really a keyword sign course for parents mostly would come under capacity building. So, and I was going to, one of the things with plans is you can kind of have a hybrid, because if you're wanting to access a basic keyword sign workshop, for example, which are only kind of 2021 items, but I'll talk about that later. Really, you could use your capacity building funds for what are they called? Here we go. Improved daily living is the area that they sit under, and it's usually what's allocated for speech pathology or other allied health service provision. You can I'll talk about that again. So basically, capacity building. But you can get a hybrid so that if you are agency managed, it can be really difficult to access a workshop because, as I said before, a lot of the providers of workshops are not necessarily registered NDIS providers, but you can ask for just a part of your plan to be plan managed or self-managed. So you can ask for the cost of 2 registrations for a workshop to be plan managed. And if you haven't got that in your plan currently, you could potentially go back to the planner and say, this is what I want to do. This is why. Could you please make a small change to your plan? Again, I'm not too sure what they're like. So in the past, like 12 months ago or 18 months ago, asking for that, you potentially would have waited until the next plan was due before they would be able to get together to actually make that change. But things might be better now because there certainly have been a lot of changes and improvements. So generally it sits under capacity building. So when you're thinking about your plan and planning for your plan, make sure that you're including that sort of funding in the capacity building. So, and this is where we're going to get into it. So the sorts of things that you might ask for supports, also known as funding, for significant communication partners to attend the keyword sign workshops. We talk about central workshops, so they're the ones that are sort of planned in advance. And so you pay as an individual to go along to that workshop, and it's, you know, a set price per person. So there's information available about that if you go to the Keyword Science Australia website and look on the state pages. And there are also, we're beginning to provide workshops online, so you can access those. But as I said, it can be tricky if you are agency managed to be able to use that funding. You might have to go back. But if you're coming up with your plan, try and make sure that you've got that funding included for you. And other significant communication partners, like maybe if grandma looks after the child a lot, then it's appropriate for them to have it. Maybe if there's some sort of, you know, it's an adolescent or an adult and they're going and spending time in other, in respite, then maybe respite workers need to be able to provide to access a workshop as well. So it's not unreasonable to think about all of those significant communication partners being supported to go to one of those central workshops. So that can be included. Another thing, kind of funding that you could think about is the provision of local workshops. And those are workshops that it's kind of come to you workshops. So you can approach the Keyword Sign Australia or your state-based keyword sign organisation or group and ask for what's called a local workshop. And they are sort of priced variably, but and depends on whether you're rural and remote or whether you're more metropolitan. But you can include, you can basically have a presenter come to you and do a basic workshop. And if you organise for that, that can be funded from your capacity building, but identify that it needs to go in there. And you could, you know, potentially get everyone there. You could get grandparents, you know, parents and mother-in-law come along, the early childhood worker, the educator, if there's if they're going to childcare or if they're going to kindy, the teachers, other allied health workers who are on your team. You know, you can organise a local workshop and just get all of the communication partners who are significant and who might be needing to communicate and needing to know keyword sign. Because, you know, I guess one of the things with keyword sign is that, you know, it really needs to be all of those significant communication partners, because there's a real risk that you know, that if someone learns a sign in one environment and then they go out into another environment with a different communication partner and they try and use that sign and the other person doesn't recognise it, that, you know, it doesn't really reinforce the use of signing, and it really it undermines their communication independence. So it's great to have as many people as possible. That's another reason why it's, you know, another support that you can ask for is someone to help coordinate, make sure that, you know, everyone's is on the page about the new signs that are being taught, you know, what's being focused on, what people have used, so that everyone's really being, it's sort of a level playing field in terms of knowledge and understanding of the different sorts of science that are being used. I'm jumping around the place, don't know quite what I'm doing. So by that I mean that's one of the kind of supports that you might request for implementation of keyword sign, because it's not about just doing a workshop. We know that people walk out of workshops and that, usually the feedback is really positive and they can see just how it works, but, it doesn't take long for people to kind of start forgetting the signs. So it's great to think about how are you going to help those people to keep on using keyword signs, to keep on learning and remembering the signs, to get more fluent in using sign and more confident in using keyword sign, and make sure that it's really viable and it has a life beyond the workshop. So, and it's usually speech pathologists or other eligible allied health providers that you might have to get that from, because it's most likely that's going to be part of the capacity building funding, and that's the only people, developers and educators, as long as they sort of fit the criteria for being able to be providers of those therapeutic supports. Now, let me tell you what that's labelled. Provision to a participant of a therapeutic support by, here we go, right? Assessment, recommendation, therapy or training, including assistive technology, physiotherapy or other therapy, which is provision to a participant of assessment, recommendation, therapy or training. Support must be delivered by a suitably qualified allied health professional. And so the NDIS has sort of got specific criteria about who fits into that qualified allied health provider. And so that's who you're seeking, is someone who can be fit that criteria, able to access that funding officially, and is also available and able to support you, and knowledgeable about keyword sign. Then the other sorts of supports might be some more direct support. So it's actually about having a speech pathologist who's actually supporting you, family member, participant, with their speech language communication skills and their communicative participation, but needs to also know about keyword sign because that's part of that whole picture. And I suppose the other thing might be a speech pathologist or an allied health assistant who's trained in keyword sign. And in the case where your primary speech pathologist doesn't have that skill, maybe you want to include consultative supports to that primary provider and to you. So you're really asking someone who's got those keyword sign competencies just to come in and be sort of involved as part of the team on more of a consultative basis. So maybe they're not doing the daily one-to-one, but they're just providing the support to kind of keep that keyword sign moving along and keeping it alive. Okay. So, and there's information available if you're kind of looking. Unfortunately, we haven't yet managed to kind of have it listed as one of the things, but if you go to the keywordsignaustralia.com.au page, there is information there about people who are currently professional members and who can provide support around keyword sign interventions. And a whole range of other information too on that Keyword Sign Australia webpage. You can, the other sort of supports you might want to include are to develop your own knowledge of and fluency in using keyword sign. So, and how that might work is variable, but there's more and more people are actually starting to offer other sorts of products. So, for example, in South Australia, thank you. Steph's just very kindly put the information in there about the address for the Keyword Sign Australia website. So you can get those, include supports. South Australia has started offering what we're calling practice sessions. So it's just 45-minute sessions once a month. Just get on, just brush up your signs, learn some new signs, have some practice, do some practice with your fluency, say some sentences, learn some signs to go with different sort of categories, do some activities, do some sign bingo or whatever. So it's just so that there might be other offers that you can find out there that are really about helping you to just maintain your capacity so that you can provide the support for the participant that you're supporting to be using and learning keyword sign effectively. And another thing that you might seek is supports to fund attendance at a group, which includes the use of keyword sign. Now, again, that might not be a specific keyword sign group. It might just be an early intervention group. But if you can find a group that is an EI group or another kind of group where keyword sign is explicitly used, then what a great opportunity. You can actually kind of hit two birds with one stone, get that support for learning new keyword sign vocabulary and helping to get to develop your skills and remind you of the signs and help you learn new vocabulary as well. So what else? And finally, the other sort of funding that you might be able to get some support for is that sort of are those resources. So I think that these are the sorts of things that you might use that consumables funding. Ask for it. Don't have a look. I know that Steph's just provided some information about the more comprehensive website that's coming, but go and have a look at that Keyword Sign Australia website and have a look at the resources that are available there and just go, which one of these do I want? And think and do check back. I'll talk about that a bit later, but do check back at sort of later on this year or closer to when you're preparing your plan and see what's available now, because with the launch of the new website, there's going to be a range of different additional resources that you might be able to access. So you might want to think about what you would like to include in your plan as part of that request for consumables, and get your providers on board with doing that too. Because once you've actually been involved in having, and you've had a plan, of course, the people who can provide you with a lot of support around what is included in your plan are your current providers. So, work with your speechy or whoever else is supporting you. If you're working with a multi-D team, or if you're working with if you've got a key worker, then work with them to see to help identify what sort of supports you'd like to see in that plan that are related to keyword signs. And Cathy, yes, I'm in South Australia, but those practice sessions are actually online, so you can find out about them. It's okay. I can speak for Keyword Sign South Australia. So you can find out about them if you have a look at the workshops the list of workshops that are being provided in South Australia for 2021. And yep, 45-minute sessions. We've tried to schedule them. I think some of them we haven't had a lot of uptake, so please do have a look at and go on get on board. Because I think that they could be really useful, and we've just tried to make them brief and fun, and I think one's between 4 and 5:30 and the other one's between 7 and 8:30. So we swap them around in terms of the month. And Jane, you're saying that you went to a playgroup that used keyword signing. That's fantastic. Was that a mainstream playgroup? And
no, it was through LifeStart through at Borkham Hills, but they were the first one to introduce us to keyword.
Right.
So we started when Carter was about 6 months. So even though he still has troubles trying to sign with his hands, he actually understands it more. So he knows his finish and start and colours and stuff like that. So it's been really good because the lady who runs the playgroup is also our speech therapist. But, it was, we went there, we didn't have a diagnosis for Carter at the time. We didn't know if he would be verbal or non-verbal. And, we'd be able to expose. So, I know how to sing with the little green frog off by heart by keyword sign. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
Jane, do you mind saying again where that playgroup is?
I can type it in, but it was with LifeStart.
LifeStart.
Yes, it was with LifeStart, and our speech therapist, her name is Jackie. But she's the one who ran the playgroup, and it was just really, really good to be exposed at such a young age for Carter and even for us, because we were able to look at doing keyword. We got in our funding within our first year of NDIS to go and learn how to do it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That's great that that was there. And yeah, some early learning services do offer keyword sign. And I mean, hopefully that will just continue to increase. Because I think that there's, and I think basically, you know, everything's led by demand. So if you say that you think that keyword sign would be a great thing to include, then speak to people, because it, you know, it doesn't take all that much for people to sort of start getting on board. And keyword sign is, you know, with access a workshop and then just start introducing it. Really, that's all that's involved. So I have people got. So what other sorts of supports? It's great to hear that your playgroup was included as one of the supports. It's often chicken and egg. It's like they provide support for an early intervention program, and hooray, they happen to be using keyword sign. But I think alternatively, you could go, I really want to, you know, I've found this playgroup that provides keyword sign, and I want to include that as part of my plan. It can get a little bit tricky. Has he gone out? No, she's come back in. It can get a bit tricky if all of your plan, you know, your service agreement is really with one provider for all of your service provision. But there's no reason that other providers can't be included. It is, in some cases, I think it can make you know, a huge difference and be a really good outcome all round if other providers are included on a consultative basis. It's not about sort of wrestling over who gets to do what. It's just about being really collaborative around service delivery and helping all the providers to be able to, I mean, in relation to keyword sign, helping all the providers to be able to include keyword sign as part of what they're doing. We are now at the. Has anyone else got any other sorts of supports that they think that they could have or could include or would like to have included within their plan that are related to keyword sign? If you think of any, we can just pop them into the chat box. That'd be great to kind of get your ideas. And thanks for that information, Jane, about the Lifestyle program. Actually, that's. It's often hard to kind of get information about what sorts of programs are offering what and where. So you know, that's something that perhaps we can think about is just kind of providing a little bit of endorsement and sharing information with others. So this is just a sort of a summary of where things might be in the NDIS support item catalogue. So workshops, really, you might be able to get them from, which I don't think you could get from core consumables. It's really from capacity building, those therapy supports for improved daily living. There is actually another item I noticed that's been included into the plan, into the, where is it? I've got all of these things around the place. There's one additional item which is under individual social skills development, and they do seem to say that could include provision of training to parents or caregivers. So that's another one to kind of investigate, because sometimes what happens is you're sort of given a sort of a standard package, which includes a specific amount of funding, and that goes into that capacity building, improved daily living, which is really the sort of therapy service provision. And it might be useful just to investigate whether you can get any other sort of funding. So, but again, I'm planning to create a document that's going to list the sorts of supports that you might be able to sort of tap into and ask to be included in your plan as part of getting keyword supports in there. So local workshops, I think really it comes potentially out of that, could come out of that new funding for individual social skills development, which could be for caregivers. Otherwise, it's really from that capacity building, improved daily living, out of that sort of bucket of funds. Then in terms of the implementation support, same. It's really likely to be have to come out of that that capacity building, improved daily living bucket of funds. The resources that you might need might come from the consumables. Some you might be able to actually access, get through if you include a capital AT support fund in your plan. So that's just some ideas about where they might come from. And again, I will ensure that this kind of gets up onto the website, which has got that kind of linkage about where you might ask for those supports to be provided. So if your plan's coming up, consider what your goals are. Plan ahead. Make sure that you're organised so that you know what your goals are overall and how they link with keyword supports that you might want. Make sure that you're considering what sort of supports those in your communication environments of your participant, the child or adult might need, so that you're also able to potentially include them in a basic workshop or give them access to some resources that might help. Talk to your speech pathology provider about what sort of support they would recommend, and if they don't feel like they've got the information, they can seek support from Keyword Sign Australia or from the Speech Pathology Australia in terms of what the guidance is about including keyword signing as part of the speech pathology interventions. Explore on the website, that Keyword Sign Australia website that Steph's provided you with a link to, what sort of resources you may benefit from, and as you're getting closer to your planning, think about accessing that up-to-date information. If your plan's already underway, it might be difficult to do anything depending on whether you're self-plan or agency managed. If you're plan managed or self-managed, talk to your planner and talk to them about why you want this, and they might be able to support you to get funding from one of your existing support group items to be able to pay for a keyword sign related support. If you're agency managed, it can be tricky, but you might want to go back and see if you can organise for some of your funds, for example, to be self-managed or plan managed, so you can access a workshop. If your plan has only just been developed, like within the last 3 weeks, you might be able to go back and get something added. But if it's older than that, I don't know what it's like now, but as I said, it can take a long time to get a review of the plan going. But it's worth approaching your planner and just saying, what might it look like, because things might have changed. It's really the planner that you need to talk to about that. And there's just a little bit of information. If you go and have a look at that Keyword Sign Australia website, that will provide you with a whole lot of information about the sorts of resources that are available now. It'll give you information about the general costs of a general membership of Keyword Sign Australia and what that might provide you. And you can have a look at the state pages and see what's on offer in the different states. If you want to get the lowdown, talk to your providers. Help them to help you to get what you need into your plan. Talk to your network, see what sorts of things they've accessed and what's been useful, and how what their experiences have been working with planners. Go to that Keyword Sign Australia website and get access to the information sheets. They'll be there soon, within a month. Have a look at the general membership and talk to your planner, because planners. Hopefully the sort of the ideas are changing, and rather than the planner being the gatekeeper, they are seeing themselves more of a support for participants to get what they need in their plan to be able to achieve their outcomes. So now we're heading over for doing a Q&A. Sorry, it's a little bit later than I had expected. And Rachel had joined us. I hope Rachel's still here. Rachel Trabuco is actually a parent of a child in South Australia who managed to get some keyword sign funding into her plan. So I'd be really interested to hear from you, Rachel, about your experiences with that, and any other questions. If you've got questions still, some have been coming up, but perhaps write them down. We'll just hear from Rachel now. Hopefully that Rachel. Yes, you're there, Rachel. Yay.
Am I here? I can't see myself, but that's okay. Yeah. So as Cathy said, I've been successful with getting some support with keyword signing in my daughter's plan. I'm actually a speech pathologist, so I've been able to use the keyword signing with my little one since birth. But yeah, had some success getting some funded workshops this time round. I was just looking back sort of over her report from the speech pathologist, and it I guess what was highlighted was the successes that we'd had using keyword signing, and the fact that my little one was trying to start using a few different signs, particularly food's a popular one, and she's using starting to use like more and finished as well. So it was actually recommended in her report that we did have some funded places to attend a workshop. So back in, I think it was about June, I attended a workshop, both myself, even though sort of I have done keyword signing workshops several years back, I thought it was good to get a little bit of a refresher. And I also went with my mum, so I was able to sort of, I guess, hear the same stuff that she was hearing at the same time and support her learning as well. And I think my daughter's just really going from strength to strength with signing. She started to do a lot more signing recently, just spontaneously, like with, I've signed monkey so many times. Every time we look at a book with animals, I sign monkey. And just the other day, she picked up a book and there was a picture of a monkey and spontaneously signed monkey and kind of went, ooh. And so that's just amazing to see, like her just using it in her like everyday environment to communicate with others. I was just looking back through her plan as well as to what her goals were, and like her goals really specifically specified keyword signing. So it said that she'd continue to explore other means of communication, and then it said e.g. keyword signing and alternative communication aids. We also have a pod for my little girl, which is a book with lots of different pictures and ways to get lots of different messages across. I must admit I do use signing more because it is portable, whereas the book isn't quite so easy to access. And I also said, thought another goal that was in her plan was that for her to be able to engage and interact with peers and other adults. So again, I thought keyword signing is a good way of supporting that, and good justification, I guess, for being able to train up others in sort of her life. So yeah, was there any sort of other questions? Is that?
Has anyone else got any other questions to ask Rachel?
On mute.
I think I'm back now. Hopefully I'm back. Can you hear me?
Mm. Yes.
Yes, good. So does anyone have any other questions of Rachel? I think it's interesting that you said, Rachel, that you basically reflected on the outcomes that you'd had from so far from using keyword sign, and that's always something that's what providers have to do in preparation for the next plan, is to reflect on progress towards the goals that have been identified, and I guess anything that might have gotten in the way of that, which is also useful to think about, because someone's been sick or something's happened in terms of access to provision of services that can make a difference too. But then if you can draw a line between those outcomes that have already occurred and the need for continuing or further support, then that's really important to do as part of the plan. And I guess that's kind of what you're talking about in those meetings in preparation for the plan. And so that Cathy, Cathy, your question was to me, but she's asking how old your daughter is, Rachel?
She's 3. She's got Down syndrome.
Yeah, I know that when we had a chat, you were saying, kind of that classic of I signed and I signed and I signed and signed and nothing was happening, and then it happened. Hooray. So.
Yeah,
Food.
yeah. I think until recently, the only one that she was really picking up on was food, and probably more and shop. Apparently, I shop a lot. But yeah.
Well, it is something we just have to do, isn't it? Really, even in lockdown.